There is a population of people. They fascinate, irritate, and are like ghosts, shape-shifting and disappearing into their surroundings. They are the high intelligent, gifted population. Intellect is only one part of who they are, and we hope to uncover the complexities with which they live their life. Here we start a new conversation. Join us as we delve into the world of intelligence. Perhaps you will discover a child, a neighbor, friend, or yourself in this conversation. Hi, welcome. I'm Cindy Dickman, host of Rethinking Intelligence. High intelligence has interested humans for centuries. How does an individual create, invent, innovate, and think the way they do? This is the fascination component, and where we often think of Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Taylor Swift, fashion designers such as Vera Wang, Henry Ford. People who somehow thought so differently and were able to take a thought and change the world. But with the same energy with which we are fascinated, criticism quickly follows. Why did they do that? Hey, did you hear about how disastrous their marriage is or their partner? Did you hear about the intense, toxic work environment they created? Did you see what they did? Wow, did you see on the news how crazy they acted? Did you? With both the fascination and criticism, intelligence remains elusive, something we don't really care to understand, and the conversation stops. I truly believe that there are 3 reasons for our lack of conversation and understanding around the high intelligence population. Number 1, we think it belongs to a few on the world stage. Definitely no one that we know. Number 2, we take intelligence very personally. We make it a value judgment about someone's ability or lack thereof. The haves and the have-nots, as I like to think about it. And number 3, there are not always outward physical or behavioral differences that indicate a neurodivergent brain. When looking between the words smart and intelligent, I'd like to break it down real quick. Smart is about quick, practical thinking, while intelligence encompasses a broader range of cognitive abilities that includes problem solving, reasoning, and academic aptitude. It is not about ability, but it is excelling in different cognitive processes. The high intelligence mind is wired to bypass all of the practical that you would think of and associate with smart, and it goes straight to the out-of-the-box creative thinking. It does not mean, though, that someone who is smart cannot think outside of the box or be creative, but it is how that process is carried out. Up until recently, high intelligence has been looked at through the lens of patterns in upbringing, home life, habits, mindsets, and behavioral aspects. I like to think of this when we look at people such as Einstein or Steve Jobs, we like to break it down. What were their 4 steps of how they started their day? What did they do in the middle of the day? And we try to break it down into very practical, functional steps that people can recreate. But to really make sense of this, we must honestly look at the brain. What are the brain differences? And recent research is starting to do just this. So today I will be discussing how a high intelligence person is identified currently in our society, in addition to some of the research that demonstrates reasons for this intelligence. In the US, we have a specific term that we use for this population, and that is called gifted. Oftentimes around the world, there is no word that describes this population. And in Europe, they do have terms for this population, such as like high potential. but gifted is not used. But I do want to say, for purposes of this podcast, I will be using high intelligence and the term gifted interchangeably. So, who are they? They are considered roughly the top 5% of the population with an IQ of 130 or greater. As with most things, there is a spectrum to intelligence, such as gifted starts at 130, profoundly gifted starts around IQ of 145. The higher you go above 130, the greater the abilities to think differently, thinking outside of the box, in addition to greater intensities such as emotional, sensory, mental health challenges, etc. I do want to take a moment to mention, though, how arbitrary I feel this testing truly is. And here's an example. I was talking to a gifted man who never considered himself as such because his IQ test results showed he was below 100. And after talking with him, there are many reasons for this testing not showing his true potential. Anything from the environment, time of day, mental, emotional, psychological state will change the effort that a gifted person will put into a test. Their system could shut down if something is off in their system. We know this actually quite well in our own family. Our oldest son loved the challenges of taking tests. He found it fun and interesting. It turned on the intellectual part of his brain, and he breezed right through it. Our youngest actually was tested in a school setting, and he was at that time having a very emotionally challenging school year, and he tested quite below. The tester actually came back and said, "I'm sorry to inform you, your son is not gifted." But a year later, they tested him again. And by then, he was in a much better place, mental health state due to the educational environment. He sailed through the test, and then we received the note, "We are so happy to inform you, your son is gifted." After we had our initial laughs about someone needing to tell us about our children and getting it obviously incorrect due to this test a year before, it was also a bit sobering that it reminded me how many parents get that first note. They don't understand what high intelligence is, and it's that one test that defines their child, and they continue on completely unaware of who their child is and what they truly need. Actually, if you go back and you read the quote or the thoughts behind the person who kind of invented our current IQ test, he himself said it is a poor representation of what the brain is of someone. It just shows one small snippet of who they are. Those who work in this field have what I like to call intelligence meters. We can spot a gifted person from across the room or after just hearing them speak one sentence. And you may ask, how is this even possible? And it's because the brain difference is real. It is how they carry themselves, how they talk about their experience, how they talk about what they like to learn or what interests them in life. Are they interested in what I am saying, mutual interest? What lights them up in that moment, what doesn't? It is a very real difference. And I had a gentleman ask me about this just the other day. He said, "Does it really matter to know what brain you have?" This person happened to be in the field of optometry, so my examples spoke to this. And I said, if you have two eyes looking in two different directions, you will function, but there are inherent challenges. You may stumble, fall, have challenges in reading, other academics, connecting with others, maybe self-esteem issues. But when the eyes are aligned, you can function better in a way that gets you closer to your best self, because your energies don't have to go to compensating for that misalignment. The same is with the brain. We spend as humans so much energy trying to understand our nervous system, stored trauma, blood type, exercise type, personality type, relationship type, all which are very important. But we never look at our brain type. What brain type do you have? How does it function? What are your needs? Why do you do what you do? What makes me, me? So, let's actually define what intelligence is. I find that defining something is very important because how many times when I look back, I have had a definition in mind for a word, and later I discover that I was completely incorrect. So let me ask you, when you think of high intelligence, what is your definition? Really smart, does well in school, perhaps socially awkward, or they make you feel like they're an old soul. Depending on the audience that I ask this question, the answers may often expand to include challenging, easily bored, emotional, stubborn, neurodivergent, or it may actually shrink to only include smart, does well in school. But as we discussed earlier, smart and intelligent are two different cognitive processes. It's tricky because even within the gifted community, the prevailing thought is this person has a neurotypical brain that just has other exceptionalities. And these exceptionalities may include diagnoses of ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, oppositional defiance disorder, sensory processing disorder. So it's a neurotypical brain, but there can often be another exceptionality that goes along with it. But according to Britannica, intelligence is the ability to easily learn or understand things, especially new information or a situation. This corroborates what we were talking about earlier between the smart and intelligence. It does not say that those without intelligence can't learn or understand. It is simply that this population that has this brain just does it more easily. I would like to expand on this definition and say that high intelligence is a person who perceives and processes the world differently. In truth, they are neurodivergent, period. This includes their senses, their emotions, their learning abilities, their relationships, how they approach work. Everything is processed and perceived differently. So if you step back and you think about it, perceiving and processing originates from one place in a living being, and that is the brain. So if something engages in these activities differently, we can assume that the brain may be different, right? And as I mentioned earlier, until recently, the brains of highly intelligent persons were not really studied through neuroimaging, through like having an MRI done to actually see the structure and function, what was happening in real time. Instead, they were looked at through more observation, and this led to really powerful commonalities that were discovered that we continue to identify with this population, such as they're easily bored, they're motivated yet unmotivated at times. They can have high academic achievement, high athletic achievement. They can be highly emotional, have sensory sensitivities, requiring different stimulation, among many others. A little side note that I do want to bring in, since I've talked about neurodivergent a couple times. When I talk about neurotypical and neurodivergent with this population, a neurotypical brain is one that comprises roughly 95% of the population, the majority. And that means that this majority, their brains function similarly from a similar structure. And this can be backed up through that neuroimaging. But when I discuss neurodivergent with this population, it is showing that this 5%, their brains do function and look very different. So back to the research. The biggest thing that I would love for you to take away from today is that intelligence, high intelligence, comes from a brain that is structurally and functionally different. And this is super, super important. A couple of these studies, I won't go into great depth, but I actually will go into depth just a little bit. Studies from around the world are unanimously showing that these brains are different. If a brain is different, it needs to be understood from a different perspective. Understood that this person is most likely not like you, or the people setting the rules for how they need to be educated, how they need to do their work in a workplace. They have different needs, concerns, and ways of being. So, if you can just hang with me for a moment, I'm going to get down in the weeds just a little bit, not much, but I'm going to highlight just a few things. So what are these brain differences? As an increased size, which allows for more connections and increased processing speed. Kind of think of it like a highway. If highways were larger in both size and number, more cars could move and keep up with things moving at a faster rate of speed. In the brain, though, this increased structure directly influences the functional efficacy. So first, let's look at the prefrontal cortex. It processes, organizes, and integrates information. So when larger, the ability to integrate new information that results in innovative thinking, problem solving, and it's probably more attuned to the world around them. The parietal lobe. When it is larger, it leads to better abstract thinking, integrating complex topics such as language and math, also with more efficiency, and the ability to understand multiple perspectives. The temporal lobe allows for increased language synthesis, memory, pattern recognition across any discipline, and the ability to make creative, novel connections between presented information. This also contributes to heightened emotional processing with regards to an individual's experience and how it comes out in creativity. The occipital lobe allows for a higher level of visual processing, which allows for a quicker intake and manipulation of information that is seen. Overall, this very brief overall, the structure in a gifted brain lends the brain for running highly efficiently on the energy that it has. While each of these speak to the how of the gifted brain, the varied structure does also lead to functions that are challenging in this population. Those are things we'll delve into in later episodes. I do not quote this research to confuse, but rather to show that the research has found definitively that the brains of those with high intelligence are different. I hope that if this is new information, this is what you take away from today's episode. That there are two different brains, structurally and functionally different. But if you feel like you make up part of this top 5 intellectual percent, I want to share an understanding of your brain through perhaps a very different lens than you've heard it before. Through my work with clients and others in the gifted population, I have heard countless times that the following words have been used to describe them: lazy, unmotivated, unfocused, just too hyper, not empathetic enough, difficult, and just too emotional. Without understanding what brain you have, these words can become defining. But when you do understand your brain, you can see it from a completely different perspective. You are not lazy. You may just be overwhelmed by an emotion or perfection that is stopping you from proceeding with something. You are not unfocused. Given the right topic or environment, you will work focused for hours. You are not too hyper. Your brain requires vast amounts of stimulation, and the environments where you spend most of your day most likely fall way short of the intellectual and physical stimulation you require. You are not unmotivated. Given the proper understanding for creativity and autonomy, you will complete any task. You are not difficult. You are just misunderstood, and it may be challenging to function daily within a system that requires so much from you and is not built with you in mind. You are not too emotional. Your brain is wired to take in so much and process so much information, not only from yourself, the world around you, but the people you encounter or see across the room. You're taking in a lot and you're absorbing a lot. Until next time.